Remember when Saturday mornings meant one thing: a talking dog, a haunted house, and a mystery that somehow always turned out to be a guy in a mask? That was Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Premiering on CBS in 1969, created by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, and produced by Hanna-Barbera. The show followed 4 teenagers, Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy, and one very cowardly Great Dane named Scooby-Doo, voiced by Don Messick. 2 seasons, 25 episodes, and somehow it became a 50-plus year franchise. Today, we're counting down 15 weird facts about Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And stick around for number 1, because the most divisive character in the entire franchise is the only reason it didn't disappear in 1980. Hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps those retro deep dives coming every week. Alright, let's climb into the Mystery Machine. Number 15. The show was almost an Archie clone with a different dog. Before the Mystery Machine, before the meddling kids, before Scooby-Doo was even called Scooby-Doo. The whole thing was pitched as a Saturday morning rock band cartoon. In 1968, CBS executive Fred Silverman was under pressure to clean up Saturday mornings. Parent watchdog groups were hammering the network over cartoon violence. Silverman's answer was to copy a hit, The Archie Show, and make a similar teen brand show, but with mysteries. The first version was called Mysteries 5. 5 teenagers in a touring rock band stumbling into spooky mysteries between gigs. Jeff, Mike, Kelly, Linda, and a kid nicknamed WW. And the dog? A bongo-playing background character named Too Much, whose name came from the hippie slang, "Too much, man." Silverman retitled the whole pitch, "Who's scared?" and brought it to CBS. The executives took one look at the artwork and passed. Too frightening, not for children. So Silverman went back to Hanna-Barbera and rebuilt it. They reshaped the teens into Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy. And Silverman promoted the dog, the background bongo player, into the star of the show. Number 14. The man who rescued Scooby-Doo. Silverman believed in Scooby-Doo. No one else did. So he pushed through the rebuild at a pace nobody expected. He had Joe Ruby, Ken Spears, and Iwao Takamoto revise the treatment to tone down the scares and lean into comedy. The monsters stayed, now the punchline, not the threat. The emotional center shifted to a cowardly dog. Silverman pitched the new dynamic as our Abbott and Costello. CBS bit. Then came the detail that told you Silverman was personally in the room. The leader of the group was originally named Ronnie. Silverman had him renamed Fred, which is not, for the record, a coincidence. Number 13. The Mystery Machine is a rollin' time capsule of 1969. You can change almost anything about Scooby-Doo. The animation, the voice cast, whether the monster is a guy in a mask or something that actually rises from the dead. One thing has barely changed in over 50 years. The Mystery Machine's paint job. If the Summer of Love had a delivery service, this would have been the company vehicle. The make and model under that paint? A ghost. Automotive obsessive have debated it for decades. Chevrolet G-Series, Dodge A100, Ford Econoline? Too stylized to be any real van, but grounded enough in 1969 van culture to feel like something parked outside a music festival. And the van itself has changed shape over the years. In the late 90s direct-to-video films, it got redrawn to look like a Chevy Astro. The 2002 live-action movie used a 1972 Vauxhall Bedford CF. But the paint scheme? Untouchable. Every reboot, every live-action film, every video game, the flower power graphics stay locked in place. Number 12. The show was designed so the kids couldn't fight back. Most Saturday morning cartoons in the late 60s had one job: punch the bad guy. Space Ghosts, the Herculoids, Birdman. Heroes flung villains into walls for 22 minutes and called it a week. Then the networks got nervous. By 1968, broadcasters were under pressure to tone down cartoon violence. CBS gutted its superhero lineup almost overnight. Silverman's answer? Teenagers who solve spooky mysteries, but never throw a punch. That's the design mandate. The kids don't fight. Nobody pulls a weapon. The closest thing to action is Fred building a Rube Goldberg trap out of a broomstick and a bucket. Half the time the trap catches the wrong person anyway. Every conflict gets resolved the same way. Logic, evidence, a mask pulled off a grown man. And the monsters are never real. Every ghost, every growling specter, a human being in a costume, usually running a real estate scam. That single limitation became the most copied formula in Saturday morning history. Josie and the Pussycats, Speed Buggy, Jabberjaw, Captain Caveman. The network wanted a safer cartoon. They got an entire genre. Number 11. Velma's most famous line was a real accident. Every kid who grew up on Scooby-Doo knows exactly what happens next. Velma is about to solve the whole mystery. The villain is 10 feet away, and right at that moment, because it's always that moment, the glasses come off. My glasses! I can't see without my glasses! That catchphrase isn't a catchphrase, it was a genuine unscripted freakout. During an early table read in 1969, voice actress Nicole Jaffe, the original Velma, actually knocked her glasses off. And somewhere in the middle of groping around the table, she blurted out exactly what everyone nearsighted would blurt out. The writers locked onto it immediately, so they wrote it in. Nicole Jaffe voiced Velma from 1969 to 1974, before stepping away to build a career as a talent agent. Every Velma since then has had to recreate that exact moment of blind groping chaos. Number 10. The Mystery Inc. gang was lifted from an early 60s sitcom. Every member of the Mystery Inc. gang was pulled from a single CBS sitcom that ran from 1959 to 1963, The Many Lives of Dobie Gillis. Creators Joe Ruby and Ken Spears confirmed it themselves. Shaggy Rogers is a near one-to-one recreation of Maynard G. Krebs, Dobie Gillis's best friend, played by Bob Denver, before Bob Denver found himself stranded on a never-ending 3-hour tour. Maynard was television's first mainstream beatnik. Goatee, torn sweatshirt, allergic to the word work. And yes, he reacted to it the exact same way Shaggy reacts to the word ghost. Hanna-Barbera just took a character, made him a hippie, and dropped him into a van. Daphne was built on Thalia Menninger, glamorous, status-driven. Velma came from Zeldy Gilroy, the brainy one. And Fred took Dobie Gillis's spot in the ensemble, though Dobie himself was a hapless dreamer rather than a confident leader. When Scooby-Doo hit the air, the characters felt familiar. A lot of the parents watching it had spent 4 years with Dobie Gillis earlier in the decade, and the Scooby-Doo kids were essentially the same kids. Number 9. Casey Kasem auditioned for the wrong character. When Casey Kasem walked into the recording studio in 1969, he wasn't trying out for Shaggy, he wanted Fred. Kasem went straight for the clean-cut leader in the orange ascot. His voice was warm, confident, authoritative. He was already a working DJ and a voice actor in Los Angeles. Fred was a natural fit. Across the table, a 23-year-old Frank Welker was reading for Shaggy. Both actors read their preferred parts. Welker liked Shaggy. Kasem wanted Fred. Then CBS made the call and flipped them. Kasem was uncomfortable at first. He later admitted he wasn't sure what a hippie voice was supposed to sound like, but he worked on it until it clicked. And it really clicked. Cartoon cowardice before Shaggy was mostly a sidekick gag, the nervous helper who'd eventually find his courage. Shaggy made cowardice the main event. Shaggy was different. Shaggy saw the monster, processed the situation with full clarity, and made the only logical decision available to him. He left. A year after Scooby-Doo premiered, Kasem launched a new weekly radio show, American Top 40. By the mid-70s, Casey Kasem was simultaneously the guy counting down the nation's biggest hits every weekend, and the guy voicing a hippie who was scared of his own shadow. Number 8. Scooby was drawn to be the worst Great Dane in show business. There's a reason Scooby doesn't look like a real Great Dane. Not a single feature on that dog is an accident. Takamoto was the character designer, and he came to Hanna-Barbera after 16 years at Disney working on Cinderella, Lady and the Tramp, and 101 Dalmatians. He called in a coworker who bred show-quality Great Danes and asked one simple question. What does the perfect Great Dane look like? Straight legs, strong posture, level back, strong chin, best in show silhouette. Then Takamoto drew the exact opposite. Bowed legs, a humpback, a small sloping chin, spots in all the wrong places. Even the color was wrong. In Takamoto's own words, he went the opposite way on every feature he could. If Scooby had looked like a proper Great Dane, imposing, regal, built like a small horse, the show falls apart in episode 1. Shaggy can't cower behind a heroic-looking dog. Every famous live-action TV dog before this was a 4-legged Boy Scout. Rin Tin Tin, Lassie, all of them noble. Scooby was the first goofy cartoon dog to lead a Saturday morning mystery franchise. Quick pause, tell us in the comments which member of Mystery Inc. were you most like? Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, or Scooby? And while you're down there, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss our next trip back through the shows we grew up on. Alright, let's get back into the countdown. Number 7. Frank Welker has been Fred Jones for over 50 years. Fred Jones has had exactly one voice in over 50 years. Same guy since 1969. A 23-year-old Frank Welker walked into a Hanna-Barbera audition booth for his first major voice acting job. He's still there. Talk about job security. Welker has voiced Fred Jones in nearly every version of Scooby-Doo since the original series aired. Reboots, spin-offs, theatrical features, video games. Voice actors get recast constantly. For the classic Mystery Machine Fred, Welker is the only voice that's ever existed. Then in 2002, Welker's workload doubled. Don Messick, the original voice of Scooby, had retired in 1996 after a stroke and passed away the next year. 5 years later, Hanna-Barbera handed the role to Welker, same actor voicing 2 members of Mystery Inc. Every Fred and Scooby exchange for the next 2 decades recorded by one person. Welker is the last original voice of the Mystery Inc. still standing. Number 6. Kasem quit Shaggy over a Burger King commercial. In the mid-90s, the studio called Kasem with what looked like an easy gig. Burger King wanted Shaggy in a commercial. Kasem read the pitch and said, no. He'd been a committed vegetarian since the early 70s. Putting Shaggy's voice in a burger ad was, to him, the same as personally endorsing factory farming. He refused. The studio pushed. Then he quit the role entirely. Billy West took over Shaggy for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island in 1998, and Scott Ines carried the character through the direct-to-video films that followed. A few years later, Warner Brothers came knocking again. Kasem said yes, with a condition. Shaggy had to become a vegetarian. On screen, in canon, for realsies. Shaggy's entire comedic identity was built on absurdly oversized sandwiches. 6 feet tall, meat stacked, inhaled in one sitting alongside a Great Dane. It's like telling the writers of Popeye to phase out the spinach. Kasem held the line. The studio blinked. When What's New Scooby-Doo premiered in 2002, Shaggy was officially, canonically, a vegetarian. Shaggy Rogers is one of a very few animated characters whose diet was permanently rewritten by the guy holding the microphone. Number 5. The show inherited a budget survival technique 12 years in the making. Tom and Jerry took roughly 14,000 drawings to produce 7 minutes of animation. Yeah. Scooby-Doo produced the same amount of screen time in about 2,000 drawings. That's 1/7 the output. The technique was called limited animation, and Scooby-Doo didn't invent it. Hanna-Barbera had been grinding at this approach since 1957, through Huckleberry Hound, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and a dozen others. By 1969, the studio had 12 years of experience making cartoons look like cartoons on a fraction of the drawings. Characters weren't redrawn every frame, only the parts that needed to move. That's why Shaggy's body stays frozen while just his mouth moves during entire monologues. And the hallways, the gang sprints past a doorway, then another, and somehow always ends up in front of the same painting. One background on a loop, slid behind the characters over and over. Warner Brothers animation legend Chuck Jones openly dismissed the Hanna-Barbera approach as illustrated radio. Cartoons you could follow with your eyes closed. Coming from the guy who directed some of the most visually inventive animation in history, it stung. The limitations bled into errors too. Shaggy's hair accidentally turned blonde for a handful of frames. Characters occasionally lost a hand. Scooby's spot migrated between scenes. And yet, all of it fused into something that didn't need to be polished. For millions of kids parked in front of the TV, that barely holding it together quality was the show. Number 4. If it weren't for you meddling kids, became the most quoted villain line in cartoon history. Every cartoon villain gets a final line. Most of them are forgettable. One of them isn't. And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. The line almost didn't exist in that exact form. The first ever use came in season 1, episode 11. A gaggle of galloping ghosts, where the villain grumbled about these blasted kids and their dog. Early phrasings bounced around for years. The clean, meddling kids version didn't actually lock in during the original show. It took 7 years, 3 different Scooby-Doo series, and a character named Mayor Dudley to finally crystallize the canonical phrasing. But once it stuck, it really stuck. Family Guy started using variations as a running gag. Other sitcoms followed. The line isn't even a joke on its own. It's just a villain complaining. The only reason it works is because of the show around it. Number 3. Scooby-Doo and Astro are practically related. If Scooby's voice has always sounded weirdly familiar, like you'd heard it before in a different show years earlier, there's a good reason you had. Scooby-Doo and Astro from the Jetsons are the same voice, same actor, same broken syllable R-heavy delivery. The actor was Don Messick. In 1962, Messick was assigned Astro on the Jetsons, but the famous R-talk technique wasn't his invention. Joe Barbera pointed him toward the Soupy Sales show, where Soupy had an off-screen dog character that talked with an R-heavy, rhoticized delivery. Barbera wanted Astro to have the same energy, so Messick executed. Stretch the words out, drop an R in front of every vowel. Hello becomes Roro. I love you, George becomes I love you, George. When Scooby-Doo came into production 7 years later, Messick pulled out the same technique and refined it. Astro was higher pitched, lighter. Scooby needed to be different. A Great Dane with more physical presence. So Messick dropped the pitch, added a rumble, thickened the voice until in his own phrase it sounded barrel-chested. Same vocal system, completely different animal. And then there's the ruh-roh. Every Gen X kid can do it. But in the very first episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, Scooby didn't say ruh-roh, he said uh-oh. Plain, no R. The rhoticized panic sound showed up for the first time in episode 10. First as ruh-oh, Messick refined it from there. And eventually it locked in as the ruh-roh everyone knows. Number 2. Zombie Island was the moment the classic gang finally met real monsters. The every monster is just a guy in a mask rule wasn't as absolute as nostalgia remembers. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo in 1985 built its entire premise on genuine supernatural threats, but that happened in a spin-off, not with the full original lineup gathered around the Mystery Machine. Then September 1998 happened. Warner Brothers dropped a direct-to-video movie called Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Marketing hit with one line that told you everything. This time, the monsters are real. The full original gang was back together, and the story built itself around one specific moment, the mask coming off and nothing being underneath it. The zombies were actually zombies. The cats were actually werecats. The supernatural threat Scooby-Doo had spent 3 decades exposing as fake was suddenly, canonically, real. For the generation that grew up on the original, the one where every monster got pulled apart and revealed to be a guy named Mr. Peterson trying to buy a boardwalk, Zombie Island was the moment the original contract expired. Number 1. The most divisive character in Scooby-Doo history is the only reason the show still exists. In the summer of 1979, ABC was about to cancel Scooby-Doo. After a decade on the air, the ratings were sinking fast, and ABC was quietly drafting the obituary. What Hanna-Barbera came up with was a tiny, relentlessly enthusiastic, knuckle-throwing puppy. His name was Scrappy-Doo. Scooby and Shaggy's whole gag was running from everything. That was funny for 6 seasons, but it had a structural problem. Characters who refuse to move the plot forward can only carry so many episodes before it stalls. Scrappy was the fix, a character who charged at danger, who'd punch a ghost in the face if you handed him a ghost. Also, crucially, he'd shout, "Puppy power!" while doing it, a catchphrase coined by Frank Welker during his own failed audition for the role. Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo premiered in September 1979, and the Hail Mary connected. Ratings jumped, ABC pulled the cancellation paperwork off the desk, the franchise got another 9 years of Scrappy-era programming and the momentum to carry it into the 80s. Scrappy-Doo saved the show. By 2002, Scrappy was shorthand for the worst thing that ever happened to a beloved franchise. When James Gunn made him the main villain of the live-action film, older fans cheered. Every reboot since has quietly avoided him. Without Scrappy, there is no franchise. No direct-to-video movies, no live-action films, no Zombie Island. The whole thing gets shelved around 1980. The character people love to hate is the only reason any of this survived. And there you have it, 15 weird facts from a Saturday morning cartoon that was never supposed to last. Which fact caught you off guard? Drop it in the comments, and while you're down there, tell us, were you a Velma, a Fred, or a full-time Shaggy hiding from every responsibility in your life? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with whoever you used to watch Scooby-Doo with on a Saturday morning. Until next time, this is Remember When.